Tonight's guest is an expert in the HVAC industry. Tersh is known as the GOAT of podcasting in the trade. I will not disagree with that. Everyone, please welcome Tersh Blissett.
That's cool.
Let's go. They were lined up outside for you, sir.
Oh man, I'm excited.
I don't know how you feel, but I've always been like, if there wasn't this thing called the internet and there wasn't some of the, like I'm probably more heavily YouTube, and it sounds like you're more podcast. Anyway, I've always said if there wasn't a YouTube, I'd probably still be just this lowly guy. Maybe I'd have 15, 20 employees by now, hopefully. Yeah. But I'd still be just fixing air conditioners in Little Hartfield, Virginia, if there wasn't this thing called the internet. It's crazy.
Oh, 100%. Like I'd be in the exact same boat. I literally was listening to podcasts, and I was listening to Brian Orr because I was tired of listening to books on tape. I figured out that a couple of the authors had their own podcast. So that's what started me on listening to podcasts. And then I was like, hey, Brian, if you ever want to talk business, I'd love to be on the show and talk business. And then that kind of snowballed into him helping me start my podcast. And man, back then we didn't even do video. Like video wasn't even a thing really when I first started podcasting. So it was more like a phone conversation that you would have with people. And it was wild getting started. Thinking back now, there was no video, anything. It literally, I had to think up things, how am I going to keep people's attention just having, an audio podcast? And it'd be interesting. And we're going to talk about business, and we're going to talk about HVAC, which some people find the most boring things in the world. So it was like, how are we going to make this interesting? So, and it eventually has morphed into automation. And I didn't know that back in 05 or 07, when I was a service manager, building out automations inside of an Excel spreadsheet, that's the beginning of a passion that's now a career. I mean, I build out automations all day, every day for different companies. It started with an Excel spreadsheet, and it was just me trying to not do the same meaningless task, mind-numbing task over and over again. I was like, I'm done with this nonsense. So, and then without the internet, I would have no idea how to do half of the things that I do, because I'm not normally the type of person that will ask somebody. Well, I take that back. I won't ask the people that are right around me questions, but I'll ask a complete stranger all kinds of questions. It's a weird concept, but and
that's a good point. Yeah, because I was just talking to so I sold my business, and now I teach classes. And one of the guys he's my boss, actually. He was telling me today that, the smaller the class, the less they are afraid to ask a question in front of others. And I was like, I never really considered that, but it's sort of like what you're just talking about. You don't have to worry about what they think, even if you ask a dumb question.
Yeah, 100%. And so now I'm comfortable with it now. I'm comfortable with being the one that looks like an idiot in front of everybody else. I don't mind that anymore. But I tell people this all the time, and even though I've said this, and I didn't reveal this early on in the podcast, but one of the main reasons that I started my podcast was because I had a speech impediment, and then it was actually 2 or 3 years after I started the podcast that I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And that's part of why, like I was diagnosed with adult ADHD and dyslexia, along with the speech impediment. And so I was like, wow, like I had no idea the struggles that I was going through. And I just doing the podcast, getting in front of people. That's how I did that. I forced myself to work around this fear, that just an overcoming fear of basically public speaking. In my mind, I was like, all right, now I'm a public speaker, even though it's just me talking into a camera or a microphone. But then it's like, but you have a couple thousand people who listen to you, but then you get in front of those same 1,000 people and you're like, oh crap, I don't think I am a public speaker. Like this is kind of tough. But I don't know, man. The internet has definitely, it's allowed us to connect with people that we would have never connected with before.
Yeah, I didn't know that story about Brian Orr. For those of you that don't know, he's kind of the OG. I mean, he has one of the largest YouTube channels and podcasts, and I mean, HVAC school, anybody that wants to learn. I mean, in fact, I'll have people come to my classes. I'll have, guys starting out, and they'll say, I want to move up fast. And I tell them every time, I'm like, okay, if you're serious, go home every night for and I'm not even asking you to watch 20 videos a night. Watch 2 videos every night for the next 2 months of Craig Migliaccio's and Brian Orr's, and you'll know more than most of the people that come to my classes.
Oh my gosh, it's wild. I mean, when I started out, I don't know if you have this in Virginia, but we don't have it in Georgia, and I actually don't think they have it in Alabama anymore, but they had something through Alabama Power where you would go to Alabama Power. It was a week-long course, and it was basically 2 years of tech school crammed into a week. Like it was a cram course of learning a lot of stuff, and it was not expensive, but you just had to pay for the technician to get there, pay for the room and board and their meal. Actually, the meals were covered with the thing. And I think it was like $100 or something like that, which is probably why they're not doing it anymore, because they were losing so much money on it. But man, I learned so much stuff in there. It was one of those things where I was like, man, I'm starving for information. I went to that class, and there's probably like 30 of us in this class. And it was this old turbine building in the side of a hydro plant, like in a dungeon. But we took this, the very first day we took the entry exam, and then the last day we took the exit exam to see, and it was the exact same exam. So you could see how much you learned over the period of that week. I think I only got 2 questions right out of everything. And the instructor was like, dude, are you kidding? Did you purposely do this? And I was like, no, man, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, this is all French to me. So when I took the exit exam, I passed with flying colors, and I got like the most improved award or whatever. And I went from, I think I got 2 questions right on the entrance, and I got 2 questions wrong on the exit. Like I literally, but I was just everything I could do to absorb all that information. If I had like Craig and Trevor and Brian and Jim Bergman and Bill Spohn, these guys, like if I had them back then, man, I don't think I could take over the world, but man, I'd be close to it. It was just the amount of information that's there now is crazy. How
nuts,
how much is there, and how available it is.